10. Horrific scandals about black R&B legends that Motown kept hidden from the world. Motown sold us perfection, glittering gowns, flawless harmonies, and smiling superstars. But what if I told you the greatest music empire in black history was also built on betrayal, exploitation, and buried voices? Behind every chart-topping hit was a scandal they fought to keep hidden, founders erased. Artists pushed out, ghost singers stealing the spotlight, and legends destroyed by contracts that stole their freedom. These are the stories Motown never wanted the world to hear. Before we expose the truth, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because tonight, Legends of Black Excellence is pulling back the curtain on the darkest secrets in R&B history. The fall of the DeBarge family. The DeBarge family was once presented by Motown as the perfect image of black elegance and musical talent. With their coordinated outfits, soft harmonies, and romantic ballads, they became the label's new hopefuls in the 1980s. But behind the stage lights was a harsh truth. Motown trusted only El DeBarge. Executives believed his clean-cut look and smooth falsetto were marketable, while the other siblings were viewed as potential liabilities. Former Motown staff admitted El was treated as the face of the group, receiving solo opportunities and extra promotion. This favoritism created tension within the family, especially as Motown molded his image while sidelining the others. Even within their success, the family was silently pressured to act flawless smile in every interview and hide the chaos happening at home. The most heartbreaking story was Bobby DeBarge, the eldest brother and original musical genius. Before the group became famous, Bobby was already leading the band Switch under Motown's subsidiary label. He had the talent and charisma to be a superstar. However, Bobby carried deep trauma from childhood, with multiple family members later alleging he suffered severe abuse from their father. This pain led him to drugs as a coping mechanism. In 1988, he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for heroin trafficking. His arrest damaged not only his life, but Motown's carefully crafted image of the angelic DeBarge family. Bobby's voice was haunting and soulful, but his internal wounds were never healed. Even after being released, he struggled with addiction and died in 1995 at just 39 from AIDS-related complications, a tragic symbol of wasted brilliance. Bunny, Randy, and Chico were equally talented, but were overshadowed by corporate decisions and family issues. The label's obsession with maintaining purity forced them to silence their pain. They were expected to look glamorous on stage, even when they couldn't pay their bills. After leaving Motown, the DeBarge family's revenue collapsed because they did not own their publishing rights. Their songs sold millions, yet they barely received royalties. They faced debt, unstable relationships, and depression. Bunny later revealed they were pressured to keep secrets to protect the label's reputation. Randy also battled legal trouble and substance abuse, reflecting the inescapable cycle that fame had started. The family, who once symbolized harmony, became fragmented, each sibling fighting their own demons, while the world still played their music. Among the siblings, Chico DeBarge tried the hardest to rebuild the family legacy. He released solo albums and even achieved a hit with Talk to Me in 1986. But just like Bobby, his past haunted him. He was arrested multiple times for drugs, including a major federal case in 1988. Every comeback attempt was overshadowed by the DeBarge name and the tragedies attached to it. Even in the 2000s, Chico publicly spoke about trying to recover, but admitted the family trauma felt like a curse. The world adored their soft melodies, but the industry ignored the emotional scars left behind. In the end, the DeBarge story is not just about a broken group, it is the chilling example of how Motown packaged pain as perfection, and how a family of incredible talent was destroyed by pressure, exploitation, and silence. Florence Ballard versus Diana Ross. The Supremes were marketed as the crown jewels of Motown, the glamorous faces of black female success in the 1960s. Yet behind their polished image was a heartbreaking story of betrayal, centered on Florence Ballard, the true founder of the group. It was Florence who formed the trio, recruited Mary Wilson and Diane, later Diana Ross. and even named the group the Supremes. In the early years, Florence had the strongest voice and the boldest personality, earning her the nickname Blondie for her confidence and charisma. But as Motown began crafting a crossover image to appeal to mainstream audiences, Berry Gordy decided Diana Ross had the look and sound he wanted to promote. Slowly, Florence was pushed from the spotlight of her own creation. Diana Ross was groomed for stardom, while Florence was sidelined. Gordy gave Ross more leads, more media attention, and full control over the group's direction. Insiders recalled that decisions were no longer democratic. Everything revolved around Diana. Florence, once the heartbeat of the Supremes, was reduced to singing backup in the group she built. The situation worsened when the group was officially renamed Diana Ross and the Supremes in 1967, a move that humiliated Florence and erased her legacy. She felt betrayed by her friend and powerless against the label's favoritism. When Florence began showing signs of frustration, Motown used it to paint her as difficult, rather than acknowledging the emotional abuse she faced. Behind the scenes, she battled alcohol and despair, watching as her dream was handed to someone else. Motown eventually forced Florence out with a termination contract worth just $139, $804, which at first glance seemed generous, but the fine print was devastating. She was banned from using the Supremes' name, even though she created it, and denied all future royalties despite contributing to the group's biggest hits. The songs she helped bring to life, Where Did Our Love Go?, Baby Love Stop. In the Name of Love continued making millions, but Florence saw none of it. She attempted to sue Motown, alleging collusion between Diana Ross and Berry Gordy to remove her. The lawsuit failed. Legally and financially crushed, she returned home defeated. Friends said she stared into space for hours, unable to understand how the industry she helped build had discarded her so easily. What followed was one of the most tragic endings in music history. Florence fell into deep depression, struggled to find steady work, and lived on welfare. At one point, she was evicted from her home and had to borrow clothes to attend performances. The woman who once wore custom gowns on stage was now forgotten by the very machine she helped launch. In 1976, Florence Ballard died at age 32 from cardiac arrest after years of poverty and emotional trauma. Newspapers called her Motown's Forgotten Supreme. Today, many fans still don't know she founded the group. Her story has become a symbol of how the industry can erase a pioneer, rewrite history, and crown a chosen star while burying the real architect. Florence Ballard wasn't just replaced, she was erased, proving that sometimes the harshest scandal isn't a public feud, but the quiet destruction of a legacy. Mary Wells' silent battle. Mary Wells was once hailed as the First Lady of Motown, the woman who opened the door for the label to conquer mainstream radio. At just 17 years old, she delivered hit after hit, Bye Bye Baby Two Lovers, and especially My Guy, which reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1964, making her the first Motown artist to achieve a major crossover success. Her smooth vocals and confident stage presence helped transform Motown from a small Detroit label into a national powerhouse. At the peak of her fame, she was Motown's top-selling female artist and their most valuable touring star. Yet at the height of her success, Mary did the unthinkable. She walked away. Fans were shocked, but behind the scenes, her departure exposed deep cracks in Motown's glittering facade. Mary Wells felt exploited. Despite selling millions of records, her contract paid her less than $100,000 total, while Motown made millions from her voice. She received little to no royalties from the songs that changed music history. Wells believed she was being underpaid and undercredited, and she demanded to own her master recordings and publishing rights. When Motown refused, she sued to break her contract, arguing that she had signed it as a minor. She won and left Motown in 1964, a move that was seen as both brave and dangerous. But the cost was enormous. She was immediately blacklisted in the industry. Other labels were scared to work with her, not wanting to anger Motown. What seemed like a bold step toward independence slowly turned into the unraveling of her career. After leaving Motown, Mary signed with 20th Century Fox Records and later Atlantic, but none of these labels invested in her the way Motown did. Her later singles charted lower touring revenue declined, and her once commanding image faded from public memory. At the same time, her personal life spiraled. She married Cecil Womack, but the relationship was filled with jealousy accusations and infidelity. Later, she married Curtis Womack, Cecil's brother, continuing a cycle of turbulence. Financial strain grew heavier each year. Without royalties or proper management, Mary was forced to perform in small clubs just to survive. While her peers like Diana Ross continued to rise, Mary struggled to pay rent. The woman who opened the door for Motown's female stars was being erased from the narrative she helped create. By the late 1980s, Mary Wells was diagnosed with laryngeal cancer, losing her ability to sing, the very gift that built Motown's empire. She had no health insurance and could not afford treatment. Friends said she sometimes had to borrow money just to buy food. In a cruel twist, the music industry that profited from her voice left her to suffer in silence. She died on July 26, 1992, at just 49 years old. Only a few major artists attended her funeral, and Motown did not offer significant financial support. Mary Wells was the trailblazer who broke the color barrier on pop radio, the woman who made Motown a household name, yet she died nearly penniless, forgotten by the empire she helped build. Her story is one of the greatest injustices in music history. The pioneer who was celebrated in the spotlight, punished for seeking fairness, and ultimately abandoned when she needed help the most. Marvin Gaye's family tragedy. Marvin Gaye was celebrated worldwide as the Prince of Soul, a visionary who blended vulnerability, protest, and sensuality in a way no artist had before. Yet behind the iconic voice was a man trapped in a psychological battlefield. From the beginning of his career, Marvin was caught in a tug-of-war between Motown's commercial demands and his father's iron-fisted control at home. His father, Marvin Sr., a strict and unpredictable Pentecostal preacher, ruled the household with fear. Marvin later admitted he grew up terrified, constantly criticized, and beaten for the smallest mistakes. Seeking escape, he found music. But even there, he landed under another powerful figure, Berry Gordy, the head of Motown. Gordy admired Marvin's talent, but pressured him to produce hit after hit, shaping his image to fit the label's clean, romantic formula. Marvin wanted creative freedom, while Gordy wanted chart toppers, creating a silent war that tormented his artistic soul. Marvin's personal life became even more complicated when he married Anna Gordy, Berry's older sister, in 1963. Their marriage blurred the line between business and family. At first, Anna supported his career, but as Marvin matured artistically, he resented being tied to the Gordy dynasty. Their relationship was passionate but explosive, filled with jealousy, power struggles, and infidelity on both sides. Worse, marrying into the Gordy family made it nearly impossible for him to break free from Motown's control, even when he wanted to leave the label. When Marvin attempted to renegotiate his contract or explore new musical directions, Motown reminded him that his career and personal life were entangled. He was locked in a golden cage, famous and adored, but emotionally suffocated. This torment fueled masterpieces like What's Going On and Let's Get It On, but also pushed him deeper into depression. As the years passed, Marvin's internal conflict intensified. He turned to drugs, isolating himself from the industry and the people who loved him. The divorce from Anna in 1977 was brutal. As part of the settlement, he agreed to give her future royalties from his next album. This led to the creation of the raw, confessional record, Here My Dear, which detailed their toxic marriage. Financial stress mounted as he owed over $600,000 in unpaid taxes, and his mental health deteriorated. He moved between cities, living in hotels or with friends, often paranoid and overwhelmed. He once said in an interview, "I've spent most of my life running from Motown, from my father, from myself." Despite being one of the greatest singers in history, Marvin was drowning in unresolved trauma, torn between duty pain and the desire to finally be free. That freedom never came. On April 1st, 1984, just one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his own father after a heated argument in the family home. The world was stunned, but those close to him were not surprised. Marvin had long predicted his death would come at his father's hands. After his passing, an even darker scandal emerged. Marvin died deep in debt, his estate tangled in lawsuits over copyrights, publishing rights, and royalties. Multiple parties, including Motown ex-wives and family members, fought over the empire his music created. The question of who truly owned his legacy became as messy as his life. Marvin Gaye's story is not just about a tragic death, it's about a sensitive genius crushed between a controlling label, a violent father, and a broken heart. His voice liberated millions, but he never escaped the chains that bound him. Tammy Terrell's collapse and ghost vocals. Tammy Terrell was one of Motown's brightest young stars, a radiant talent whose voice blended perfectly with Marvin Gaye in timeless duets like "Ain't No Mountain High Enough" and "You're All I Need to Get By." On stage, she appeared joyful and full of life, but behind her smile was a silent struggle. In 1967, during a performance with Marvin in Virginia, Tammy suddenly collapsed on stage in front of thousands of fans. Marvin caught her in his arms as the music stopped and the audience gasped. Soon after, doctors diagnosed her with a malignant brain tumor, forcing her into multiple surgeries over the next few years. Despite her declining health, Motown continued to use her image to sell records. The public saw glamour, but privately, Tammy was fighting for her life, physically exhausted and emotionally drained. Beyond her illness, Tammy's personal relationships added even more pain. She had a turbulent romance with David Ruffin, lead singer of The Temptations, who was known for his unpredictable behavior. Friends alleged that he was violent toward her, including a disturbing rumor that he once struck her with a motorcycle helmet. Although these accusations were never officially confirmed, the stories haunted her legacy and raised questions about how much abuse she endured while Motown looked the other way. Some believed the emotional stress and physical trauma worsened her condition. While no medical link was ever proven between the rumored assaults and her tumor, the whispers revealed the brutal reality many female artists faced, trapped between fame-toxic relationships and an industry unwilling to protect them. As Tammy grew too sick to record, Motown faced a business problem. Her albums were selling too well to stop production. Instead of allowing her to rest, the label made a shocking decision. Valerie Simpson from the songwriting duo Ashford and Simpson was reportedly brought into the studio to secretly record vocals in Tammy's place for the Easy album. Yet Motown still put Tammy's name and image on the cover, pretending it was her voice. Valerie later admitted she sang guide tracks and may have been used on the final recordings. For fans, the deception was heartbreaking. Beloved songs may not have been sung by the woman whose face graced the albums. This ghost vocal scandal revealed how far Motown would go to protect profits, even if it meant erasing an artist's voice while she was still alive. Tammy Terrell passed away on March 16, 1970, at just 24 years old after 8 brain surgeries. Her death sent shockwaves through the music world, but what happened next exposed the deep tension between her family and the label. Tammy's mother, devastated by how Motown treated her daughter, made a bold statement: no Motown executives or staff were allowed at the funeral. The only person from the company permitted to attend was Marvin Gaye, who had been Tammy's closest friend and duet partner. He stood over her casket in tears, later saying her death shattered his spirit and changed his music forever. Tammy's story is one of the most tragic in Motown history. A gifted woman manipulated by the industry, hurt by love, silenced in her final recordings, and ultimately honored only by those who truly loved her. Her legacy is a haunting reminder of how fame can hide unimaginable pain behind the microphone. The Jackson 5's stolen childhood. When the Jackson 5 burst onto the Motown stage in 1969, they were marketed as the perfect family act. 5 talented brothers with dazzling smiles, tight choreography, and irresistible charm. Their debut single, I Want You Back, hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, followed by 3 more consecutive #1 hits, making them the first group in history to achieve such a feat. But behind the infectious music was a brutal reality. Their father, Joseph Jackson, ran rehearsals with military discipline. The brothers later revealed they were forced to practice until their feet bled, and any mistake was met with physical punishment. Michael, the youngest and most gifted, received the harshest treatment. There was no playtime, no school dances, no friends, only rehearsals, performances, and fear. While the world saw child prodigies at home, they lived under constant pressure, stripped of normal childhood experiences. Once Motown signed the Jackson 5, the label took control of nearly every aspect of their lives. They dictated what the boys wore, how they spoke in interviews, and even how they smiled on camera. The Jacksons were teenagers, but their schedules were that of full-grown adults, recording by day, rehearsing by evening, performing at night, and doing promotional appearances in between. Motown also tightly controlled the money. The brothers rarely saw how much they earned, as funds were funneled through the label managers and Joseph. Michael later admitted he didn't even know what a bank account was as a child because everything was handled for him. The group's public image was fun-loving family, but behind the scenes they were exhausted, monitored, and forced to act happy no matter how they really felt. Motown had turned them into a brand, profitable, lovable, and completely controlled. For Michael Jackson, the emotional damage lasted a lifetime. Fame trapped him at the age he became a star. He often said, "When other kids were playing, I was working." He missed out on parties, friendships, and freedom. On tour, he cried in hotel rooms, longing to be a normal boy. The constant pressure to be perfect created deep insecurity. Michael later suffered from body image issues, insomnia, loneliness, and anxiety that followed him even into his record-breaking solo career. He wrote the song "Childhood" as a confession of his stolen youth. "Have you seen my childhood?" He asked a question that revealed the pain hidden behind the king of pop's legendary success. His transformation from a joyful child performer into a deeply troubled adult was not random. It was the price of being forced into fame too early and never being allowed to stop. The Jackson 5 story represents the dark truth of child stardom. Incredible success built on emotional sacrifice. Motown turned 5 brothers into global icons, but the cost was childhood itself. Joseph's strict control at home and Motown's corporate exploitation in business created a cage Michael could never fully escape. Even after leaving Motown in 1975, the scars remained. Michael spent the rest of his life chasing the innocence he never had through Neverland Ranch friendships with children and the fantasy of rewinding time. The world remembers the glittering performances and historic achievements, but behind the fame was a boy who never got to grow up naturally. The Jackson 5 didn't just pay the price of success, they proved that child fame can create legends on stage while destroying lives in silence. Berry Gordy and Diana Ross power scandal. Berry Gordy was celebrated as the mastermind behind Motown, the man who turned a small Detroit label into a global empire. But behind the success was a network of power favoritism and quiet manipulation, most clearly seen in his relationship with Diana Ross. In the early 1960s, Diana was just one of 3 members of the Supremes, but after becoming romantically involved with Gordy, she was pushed to center stage. Other members, including Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson, noticed that every major decision suddenly revolved around Diana. Gordy personally groomed her for solo stardom, giving her more lead vocals, press interviews, and private coaching. While this partnership made Diana Ross a superstar, it also raised questions: was Motown about talent, or about who Gordy loved? The line between business and personal life became blurred, and many artists felt the system was no longer fair. In 1971, Diana Ross gave birth to her first daughter, Rhonda, and for years the public believed her husband at the time, Robert Ellis Silberstein, was the father. Decades later, Rhonda confirmed that Berry Gordy was her biological father, proving the long-rumored affair was true. This revelation intensified accusations of favoritism. Gordy didn't just promote Diana, he built Motown around her. While other artists fought for attention, she received the best songwriters, the biggest budgets, and the most marketing. Meanwhile, countless equally talented singers were left in her shadow. This favoritism wasn't just emotional, it was financial. Under Gordy's strict contracts, Motown took majority ownership of artists' publishing rights, masters, and likenesses. Many legendary performers didn't own their own hits, while Diana enjoyed special deals and long-term protection. The message was clear: loyalty to Gordy came with rewards, and betrayal came with silence. Motown's empire was powered by relentless touring. Gordy believed that constant exposure kept artists profitable, so he scheduled back-to-back tours without rest. Singers performed even when sick, exhausted, or grieving. Many artists later revealed they were forced to take pills just to keep going. Diana Ross, as Motown's golden child, was pushed the hardest, appearing on television, doing interviews, movies, and concerts with unimaginable pressure. But while Diana benefited from Gordy's favoritism, others suffered quietly. Some singers collapsed from exhaustion, others lost their voices permanently. Even financial rewards were limited. Because Motown controlled royalties and expenses, many artists ended up with less money than people assumed. The glamorous Motown image hid a deeper truth. The label treated entertainers like products, and Gordy's personal preferences decided who rose and who disappeared. Perhaps the most brutal example of Motown rewriting history was how Gordy treated Rioma Gordy, his ex-wife and early business partner. Rioma played a key role in Motown's foundation, handling finances and supporting Gordy when the label struggled. But after their divorce, she was slowly erased from the company's narrative. The ultimate insult came during Motown 25, the televised anniversary special in 1983. The event honored the label's legends and leaders, yet Rioma was seated in the balcony far from the main floor, and her name was never mentioned. This symbolic exclusion showed how Gordy controlled not only contracts, but legacy itself. He decided who would be remembered and who would be erased. From secret relationships to unfair contracts, forced touring, and historical revision, the story of Berry Gordy and Diana Ross is not just about romance. It is about the dangerous power of one man shaping the entire destiny of black music history. The hidden ghost vocalists. In the golden age of Motown, fans believed every voice on a hit record belonged to the star on the album cover. But behind the polished harmonies and flawless production, there was a secret the label never wanted the world to know: ghost vocals. When lead singers were unavailable, too ill to record, or simply not performing to Motown's standards, the label often turned to backup vocalists or songwriters to lay down the tracks without giving them credit. At the center of this hidden reality were Valerie Simpson and Nicholas Ashford, the powerhouse songwriting duo behind hits like Ain't No Mountain High Enough. They were hired to write, arrange, and produce songs, but they were also asked to record demo vocals for reference. However, the shocking truth is that sometimes these demos were never replaced. Instead, the label released them as final versions, passing their voices off as the headlining artist. One of the most controversial examples involved the album Easy by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, released in 1969. By this time, Tammy was suffering from a brain tumor and physically unable to spend long hours in the studio. Rather than delay the album or publicly acknowledge her illness, Motown made a cold decision. Valerie Simpson stepped in to record many of Tammy's lead vocals. While Valerie later admitted she sang to help finish the project, the label never credited her as the true singer. The public believed they were listening to Tammy's final performances, when in reality, some of the most emotional vocals belonged to Valerie. The album cover showed Marvin and Tammy smiling together, but the truth was hidden in the shadows, proving Motown prioritized product over authenticity. Ashford and Simpson were not the only victims of this practice. Motown frequently used uncredited studio singers such as the Andantes, a female trio who secretly provided background vocals on countless Supreme's Four Tops and Marvin Gaye records, often replacing the group members themselves. In some cases, the so-called lead singers barely appeared on their own tracks. Producers wanted consistent sound, and backup singers who could deliver quickly became the label's secret weapon. Yet despite carrying entire songs, these voices were never acknowledged. They received a small session fee, no royalties, and no recognition. The famous faces got the spotlight and applause, while the real vocal labor was buried in anonymity. This deception not only robbed artists of credit, it rewrote music history. For Valerie Simpson, the emotional toll was complicated. She loved writing and singing, but watching other artists receive praise for performances she delivered was painful. In later interviews, she confessed, "I wasn't angry with Tammy. I was sad for her. But I wished people knew how hard we worked." That statement reveals the deeper scandal. Motown built perfection on the backs of uncredited talent. Ghost vocals were not rare accidents, they were a hidden system. Fans praised legends, unaware they were sometimes applauding the wrong voices. The story of Valerie Simpson and the ghost vocal era exposes a harsh truth about Motown's legacy. Even in a label built on black excellence, many contributors were silenced so that a chosen few could shine. Their voices shaped the sound of a generation, yet their names were erased from history. The Temptations' internal breakdown. The Temptations were the epitome of Motown perfection. 5 sharply dressed men executing flawless choreography while delivering some of the most iconic vocals in R&B history. But behind their polished image was a painful reality, and no one embodied that pain more than Paul Williams, the group's original founder and emotional core. Paul was known for his smooth baritone voice and elegant stage presence, but as pressure mounted, he descended into depression and alcohol dependency. Despite his declining health, Motown forced him to keep performing. He often had to lean against the microphone stand just to stay upright. Backstage, he would collapse in dressing rooms, only to be pushed back on stage minutes later. His illness was treated not with compassion, but with cover-ups. Instead of receiving help, Paul was told to keep smiling even as his life unraveled in silence. Motown's control over the Temptations went far beyond music. The label decided who sang lead, based not only on talent, but on image and marketability. When David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks rose in popularity, Paul, despite being a founding member, was quietly pushed aside. His signature lead vocals were given to others, damaging his confidence. The internal competition was brutal. Members fought over spotlight time, and Motown fanned the flames by favoring whoever they believed would sell the most records. Group decisions were no longer democratic. They were dictated by executives. This constant battle for the microphone created deep resentment. The Temptations looked unified on stage, but off-stage the group was slowly tearing itself apart. What fans saw as artistic evolution was, in reality, a cycle of favoritism and forced replacements. Life on the road made things even worse. The Temptations were placed on grueling touring schedules, performing multiple shows a day, sleeping on buses, waking up in new cities with no rest. Rumors circulated that managers encouraged drug use and alcohol to help the members stay awake or cope with exhaustion. Some artists later admitted they were handed pills without knowing what they were. Instead of receiving proper medical support, they were pushed to maintain the Motown machine at any cost. It became nearly impossible to separate ambition from survival. While audiences saw smiling faces and synchronized dance moves behind the curtains, the members were emotionally and physically deteriorating. The pressure to remain perfect legends was slowly killing them. As the internal and external strain intensified, the Temptations underwent constant lineup changes, turning the group into a revolving door of members. Over the years, more than 20 different men cycled through the group. Friendships shattered, loyalties crumbled, and original members were replaced as if they were disposable. Paul Williams, the man who started it all, could no longer perform. In 1973, he was found dead in his car at just 34 years old. The death was ruled a suicide, but many close to him believed there was more to the story. His passing exposed how Motown's relentless pursuit of perfection destroyed the very artists who built its legacy. The Temptations' success was built on harmony, but their history is one of heartbreak, pressure manipulation, and the tragic fall of a leader whose voice was silenced by the very system he helped create. Motown's forgotten and buried artists. Motown was known for transforming unknown singers into global sensations. But for every superstar the label produced, there were countless artists whose dreams were buried before the world ever heard their voices. These lesser-known performers signed contracts believing they would become the next Marvin Gaye or Diana Ross, only to discover the label valued image over individuality. Many were told to lose weight, lighten their skin tone, change their hair, or dress more market-friendly. If they resisted these demands, executives quietly pushed them aside. Some singers were forced to abandon their natural style and copy existing stars, erasing their identity in exchange for a chance at success. Instead of nurturing unique voices, Motown shaped artists into products, and those who didn't fit the mold were treated as disposable. A darker truth hid beneath Motown's glamorous reputation: the label had absolute power over its artists' music. When a singer completed an album, Motown had the authority to lock it away indefinitely if it didn't align with their commercial vision. Dozens of finished records were shelved, never released to the public. These were not low-quality projects. Many were innovative and ahead of their time, but because executives didn't see immediate profit, they were buried in vaults. Artists begged to be released from their contracts or to take their music elsewhere, but Motown refused. The label owned the masters, meaning singers could not reclaim the songs they wrote or recorded. Their voices were trapped in storage, their creativity silenced. For some, this single decision ended their careers entirely. When dreams of stardom evaporated, many abandoned artists were reassigned as background vocalists or demo singers. These performers recorded harmonies, blended arrangements, and in some cases even sang full leads to guide other artists. Yet when the final record was released, their names were nowhere to be found. They were paid a small session fee and erased from history. Their voices became the foundation of Motown's signature sound, but the credit went to bigger stars. Some of Motown's greatest hits secretly featured uncredited vocals from these invisible talents. They carried the label from the shadows, keeping the machine running while the spotlight shone on others who often didn't sing every note the public heard. These forgotten artists became ghosts behind the spotlight, the human cost of Motown's pursuit of perfection. They performed on tours without recognition, wrote songs without publishing rights, and lived in poverty while their voices played on the radio. Their contributions were never celebrated, their names never mentioned in award shows, documentaries, or history books. The world remembers the legends, but not the people who helped create them. These buried talents kept Motown alive, yet were denied the fame, money, and respect they deserved. Their story reveals the harshest scandal of all success built on silence, where the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. Motown sold the world a dream of unity, beauty, and timeless music. But behind the spotlight were heartbreaks the public was never meant to see. From founders being erased to albums locked away forever to uncredited voices, carrying hit records, the label built legends while sacrificing the very people who made its success possible. These stories prove that fame isn't always glamorous. It can be political, painful, and deeply unfair. Now that the truth is finally coming to light, one question remains: was Motown a miracle of black excellence or a machine that exploited its own? Let's talk about it in the comments. Legends of Black Excellence.